Welcome back to the Art of Lost and Found. Today, I'm thrilled to share a conversation with someone extraordinary, a visionary, a healer, and a creative force who has redefined what it means to live and lead in alignment with your purpose. Meet Malina Dawn, an Indigenous yogi, artist, and storyteller whose journey will leave you deeply inspired. But before I dive into Malina's story, this isn't just Malina's story. It's also the story of the relationship that we've built over years of collaboration. We've grown together and we've transformed together. As her business coach, mentor, brand and website designer, and generally just her creative doula, I've had the honor of guiding her through one of the most profound and personal journeys a creative entrepreneur can take, building her online home. What started out as just a website turned into a deeply confronting process, one that required Malina to face layers of ancestral patterns, of self-doubt and perfectionism, while simultaneously gaining clarity about her mission, her audience, and the legacy she wants to leave. Get ready to be inspired by Malina's wisdom, artistry, and the incredible clarity that she's gained through this journey. Her story reminds us that true creative power lies in the willingness to face yourself, to stay open to possibility, and to trust the process. Now, without further ado, let's dive in. I am so excited to welcome someone so near and so dear to me to the podcast, Indigenous yogi Malina Dawn. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having me, girl.
So, Malina, I invited you onto the podcast in particular because you are a magical being who has had a huge impact on my life. And you and I have worked together in various capacities, and a project that we have been trying to bring into the world, a sacred, creative, doulaing experience, has been articulating, structuring, designing, and publishing your online home, your actual website, not someone else's platform that you're able to participate in, but a place that you have full creative control over and all the space that you need, and nobody gets to decide who sees what. So this has been an incredibly deep process, and you've been through it. And I felt like it would be a beautiful opportunity for you to be able to take the spaciousness that is available in a podcast and share your story of fully stepping into this and officially having MalinaDawn.com live and in the world.
Yes. Tina's comment, and thank you. I wholeheartedly agree with all of that. Our journey has been rich and super deep, and I've wanted to share pieces of it along the way, but it's just been so hard because it's been such a process. And I'm so glad we just get to talk about it, because I really think that this is something that a lot of creative entrepreneurs are up against. And to have gone through it myself to the place that I am now has just been the most transformational journey.
So for people who aren't familiar with your work, can you share a little bit about what you do and what makes you so unique and so fired up about doing the work in the way that you do it?
Oh, gosh, yeah. So let's see. I mean, I was born as a sensitive. I call myself a sensitive, and I have gifts, natural gifts that connect me to like spirit side, basically, and like my psychic senses. And I've always been that way from the time I was a child, and it was a long journey to get to where I am now. And yoga has been a really, really powerful part of that journey for me. Yoga found me when I was 17 years old, and I was a little over 20 years ago now. And I didn't grow up with my culture. My family, of course, has been affected by the residential schools in so-called Canada. And as a result, our medicine ways, our knowledge, our Indigenous knowledge, our ceremonies, everything was like put underground and cut at the roots. So I wasn't raised with Indigenous ways of being in that sense. In other ways, I was, like through my family. But I was largely kind of like always searching for something. I did a lot of traveling in my 20s. And always found myself in other cultures and other cultural ceremonies. And then a number of years passed, and I ended up back on my ancestral territory in the Northwest Territories, traditional territory of the Dene and Salt River First Nation and Métis people. And that's when I met my elder, and she took me under her wing and she started to teach me our cultural ways. So I was practicing yoga all along those years. And then I started to receive my personal family cultural teachings. And a number of years continued to go by. And over time, as I practiced both of them, I started to see these connections form, because yoga is rooted in Indigenous ways of being from land, as is my culture. And I just started to see all these parallels and all of these places in the teachings that were so complementary to each other. It's like kind of same thing, but different language. And they, of course, there's some big differences too, but they work together really well. And as I taught over the years, just showed up consistently to teach in whatever community I was in. I was always teaching classes anywhere from like 5 to 20 classes a week in privates or studios or whatever it is. There's a certain point in time, maybe 10 years ago now, something like that, where it just all started to click. And it was like, wait a minute. And I started to see those connections. Yeah. And it just honestly, organically kind of developed into what I do and how I share and who I am in the world now. And so when I teach from a place, I share the teachings from a place of understanding indigeneity and understanding the medicine wheel, and understanding how important roots, like knowledge of roots, are the roots of yoga, greater than just the physical practice that has been so glorified in the West for so many years, and then my knowledge and my understanding of colonization started to develop. And I learned about the history of yoga, as well as history of South Asian countries and history of so-called Canada, and what impact colonization has on Indigenous medicine and Indigenous ways of being that are natural ways of healing that are really so simple. So it's been like a really slow gathering of knowledge through personal experience and through just showing up to continue studying both paths, that allows me to share the teachings and the practice from a really holistic way, and to look at whoever is in my presence who's learning, to help them to understand how to access yoga from this really like accessible way, but also it's really deep. It has roots, and because it has roots, is what makes it so healing. So I think also, because I was disconnected from my culture, that's also served my journey, because I knew what it felt like to be disconnected, and then what it felt like to come into the presence of medicine, of whatever it is, ceremony, of a yoga class that is taught in a holistic sense. And I started to heal through the practice of yoga. And yoga was the first Indigenous medicine that I came into contact with before my own culture. And that's the beauty of yoga. The way that I have been exposed to it in many of my teachers is it is very inclusive. It's inviting. And that's the beauty of Indigenous medicine, is it wants us all to gather and to become sweet and to find our power, come back into right relationship with ourselves and with the earth and with community and with the God of our understanding, so that maybe we can experience harmony, you know? So I think that there are so many ways that the Creator set my life up to experience things so that I can share the practice the way that I do now. The reason I'm so enthusiastic about sharing yoga, and when I say yoga, I share yoga asana, which is the postures. I share pranayama, which is breath work, and I'm a certified breathwork therapist now. I share japa, which is chanting, and meditation. The reason I'm so enthusiastic about it is because it works. Like, yoga is an experiential science, spiritual science, and I've been in the laboratory of the yoga practice almost, a good part of my life now. And I know that it works, and it's helped me move through the most challenging times of my life. It's helped me to access power and dreams and vision and kind of like learn to claim the life that my spirit is here to live. Yoga helps me with all of that. And anytime I see someone go through the practice or kind of go into a deeper space or make a breakthrough, it's like the first time all over again. I'm just so grateful to be an ally and a teacher and a student of the yoga practice.
Yeah.
And I think I'll probably be doing it until I'm ready to go to the other side, to be honest.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit, I think, about my journey.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things that really stands out to me about your work beyond what you shared, because of course, when I came across your work, I was like, I've never seen anything like this before. I haven't seen this combination. Mm-hmm. But one of the things I really appreciate about the way that you share the work is through your incredible storytelling and documentation of your journey. Whoa. In process. Not so much the real messy parts that you're like in the thick of, which I think is honestly an appropriate boundary for you, for your well-being, for your process to honor where you're at. But your ability to articulate and share the experience of your journey with such like masterful storytelling in a bite-sized, easy to digest way that platforms like Instagram sort of force you into. And as somebody who has struggled a lot with that really narrow way of telling a story in such small pieces of time, it really made an impression for me, the way that you've been able to master that platform. And I feel like your community, your audience, shares that sentiment based on the comments that they make, the way that they're interacting and resharing. Like you've been able to capture and communicate something so complex in a way that is so bite-sized and easy to digest and integrate.
Thank you. Yeah. I don't exactly fully know why that is, but I think social media when it first came out was just kind of fun. I remember when it was more fun, like less work, less kind of strategy, and just more like sharing. And I've always been a writer. And I've always loved to expose my inner world. I guess that's kind of like the dharma of an artist, right? Is needing to have whatever's going on inside, sharing it with the world. And I've always found great. I mean, it's not always easy. It can be vulnerable. It's absolutely vulnerable, but there's something inside of me that just tells me to share. So I don't know if that's the voice of the grandmothers and the grandfathers or the creator or what have you, but there's this sort of channeling place that opens up. And once I go through an experience, I don't like to share when I'm in the depths of it, because it's just, you know, I'm in process. I'm like going through it, and it's a really sacred, holy time when you're going through a really deep process, especially if there's grief or there's like rage or there's limiting beliefs you're pressing up against, and it gets confusing, gets foggy. Like I go through all of that like all the time in many different ways. But it's when I come out the other side, I'm like, okay, I worked it out. And I worked it out because of my yoga practice. Like that's what helps me to work it out. And then I give voice to it, because I do think that it's really important that people understand that like we're all human and we all experience the same things. And I'm going through it just like you are, but hey, I've learned some tricks along the way. So here they are. So I'm just really happy to write. It's really relieving for me to write. I ache for it when it hasn't happened in a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You said that something very specific about artistry and the dharma of the artist exposing the insides to the external world as being the dharma of the artist. This podcast in particular, the origin of it and the legacy of it is really about this concept of creativity, creative recovery in particular, that separation that happens in pretty much all of us, people who were creative as children, which is all of us, and the seeping in of other people's fears and judgments and concerns and best intentions and all of that tend to repel people from their artistic, creative paths. So can you speak a little bit to what is your relationship with creativity as a concept and also as your own creativity? And then how do you weave that together with this concept of artistry?
I think for me, like being an artist is just allowing a certain life force energy to move through my being, however it wants to express, because art is vast and always like redefining itself. You know, I feel like art is really hard to define. And once you start to try to define it, it's like the medicine of it disappears, you know? So for me, it's when I feel connected to something that is greater than myself. Like my life is about opening myself up like a hollow bone to let the medicine or the gifts or the message, the dharma come through me from the divine, from the creator, from who I call the grandmothers and the grandfathers. And like, I know it's part of my purpose, earth side, to just share and to share things that are rooted in truth and also beauty, things that move people to a place of wanting to liberate themselves from their own suffering. Yeah. Whatever that experience is. And it's such a vast experience. And when I feel the creative force move through me, it comes through in a number of ways. It comes through my writing. It comes through making videos. It comes from singing. It comes from dancing, of course. Yeah. And sharing that. I think like sharing the art that comes through us is just, our world is aching for it. Our world needs more artists to be showing and sharing from that deep place inside. It's because art transforms and it uplifts. And that's how I feel when I'm in that creative state, is there's just something that's in me that's like, oh, this just feels so good, or it feels so potent. I want to put it out into the world, and maybe it'll like lift someone up a little bit. And I feel that way when I take in art from other people. So I don't know why I haven't gotten into any of these kind of artist traps. I've done visual art over the years. I used to draw when I was a kid, and was really good at it. I didn't stick with it, but I really think it's really that creative force that and that prana that flows through. And we're also unique, which is why I love sharing the yoga practice, and like asana and breath work can help to clear out the things that we hold, those limiting beliefs, the fears, the doubts, the judgments, the other voices. It helps to clear that out so that we can hear the voice of our own spirit and our own creativity, and then find the courage as well to just be like, okay, I'm just going to live this. Like, how liberating is that, just to live your art?
Yeah.
Whatever it is, you know? And the other thing that I'll say is I think that capitalism and money has intersected with it in a way that causes stress and expectation, and it changes the process and the experience of art. So that's tricky. That's such a tricky and a nuanced and a complex subject, but that's there too.
Yeah. I did an episode on that, particularly on imposter syndrome. And I talked about working with a variety of creatives, and how imposter syndrome doesn't go away. It just changes form. And so the move is not to banish it. It's to learn to interact with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'd love to segue this into your experience with your website in particular, because I think it's so interesting how we can be so fully embodied in our power and our wisdom and our knowing. But then when it comes to doing it for ourselves, to making our own shit, to moving through our own stuff, like it changes. It changes it in a way that is almost like, it's really disorienting and almost unrecognizable. You know, I've designed probably 100 different brand identities. I could not do my own. I couldn't do it. And I tried for years and years. It was like pulling teeth. And eventually I hired another designer to do it. And then I tweaked it. I adjusted it. I made it mine. I was able to embrace it. But I couldn't do for myself what I so effortlessly could do for others. And so I'm curious about your experience, speaking to what you just said about owning and embodying your artistry and your dharma and your uniqueness. And then you're confronted with, oh, I have to make a website and do this whole process and get it live. Like, can we start moving into what that experience has been like for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I'd love to talk about it.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, the floor is yours. Start sharing from your perspective what feels like the journey that you went on.
Yeah, absolutely. It was like the journey of building my website was nothing that I could have expected. I thought building a website was just this easy, simple thing that you do. You buy a Wix or you buy a Squarespace, and then you just like build it and you put up your most loved pictures and put some words up and, you know, done. And I tried that and it kept renewing for about 2 years in a row and I couldn't. And I know that's a common experience.
Yeah, only $200. Great, look at me. It'll be done by the end of the week. It's like, it's renewed again? What? Oh, no. And the burden and the shame and all the things. Like, I'm sure there's people listening to this going, oh, man, do I feel that one?
Oh, yeah, totally. And it's always on your to-do list as well. Like, I'm just carrying it around day after day, work on my website. And the years can go by. So I definitely had that experience. But then when I met you and we had our first meeting and then decided to do some coaching work, we started to get into it. And I was like, whoa, this is a very like involved process. I had no idea there would be so much work involved, and not just on the technical side of things, the building of the systems side, the building of the website and all the back end stuff and organizing your life structure and your routines and your days and your schedules. But the inner work required, that really surprised me. I mean, it doesn't surprise me now looking back, but I had no idea. And so we started to get into it. And I think the first time we worked together, it was maybe over 6 months. And I remember just continuing to think like, this should be easy. This should be no problem. And yet it wasn't. It was getting increasingly harder. My inner experience was getting increasingly harder. And instead of feeling clearer, I was getting more confused. Disoriented is a good word that you mentioned, and foggy. And all of these emotions were coming up. And I just didn't know like what was going on. It was almost crippling in a sense, to try to make sense of the process that I was in. And I kept putting like these short timelines on it, or these short timeline expectations where it's like, okay, in a month I'll be done and then I can launch my website, or okay, I'll give it another 2 months, or I'll give it another. And then that just kept going. And there was a period in there, probably like the middle part of our journey together, where it got so hard for me. I was confronted with so much inner stuff. The imposter syndrome came up. The like, who am I to claim that I know anything in this vast body of knowledge that goes back, thousands of years? Who am I to claim that I can help anyone with their life path? Even though I've been doing it. I've been doing it all along in my sessions and in people that show up. But this like idea of claiming it on another level and putting it out there on a professional level and having people come to me that may not know me, it was really terrifying. And on top of that, so the imposter syndrome, really high levels of self-doubt visited me for probably the better part of a year. And I would just wake up to feeling this every day. And it was like getting so heavy. And then on top of that, I started to discover that it wasn't just my stuff that I was working through, it's ancestral stuff that I was working through. Like claiming my gifts and my dharma on that level and letting myself receive more, not just financially, but abundance on all levels. It's like it hadn't been patterned into my genetics from my particular DNA and my lineage and my ancestors. My ancestor story goes into great pain and suffering, and there wasn't a lot of thriving. I don't come from money. My parents didn't have a lot of money. They made it work. We're rich in compassion and unconditional love and humility, and we have a really strong work ethic, but financial abundance, no. And so that came up really strong. And because I'm connected to my ancestors and to spirit side, and my yoga practice helps me to connect to it as well, there was a lot of things and insights and visitations from them coming through where it's like I could feel all of this being worked out in my body, in real time. There were days where I would sit in my sadhana, my morning practice, and I would just cry because of feeling like this guilt of being able to receive in my life, even though my ancestors couldn't respected or honored in the way that I now get to be respected and honored, And so it's a great gift for me to claim these gifts, and it is the way that I honor them, but there's a lot that needed to be witnessed and shed along the way to really stepping into that power.
Yeah.
So, and all of this came from the idea of just building a website.
Right.
No idea. And so it was like a multi-dimensional experience. It was very layered. It needed a lot more time than I realized. And another thing that I learned along the way is that I don't love this idea of grinding, of like the colonial grind. I like to work at a slightly slower pace.
Yeah.
I like to work in a way where I'm in touch with my daily rhythms. I have enough time for self-care, for community care, to like nourish myself and to work business in there, you know? And so because of that, I just also needed and wanted more time. But I kept feeling this pressure, like, I should be doing this faster. Why isn't it done yet? Like, get out there. And it's like, where is that voice coming from? Realizing it's the voice of the overculture that we're living in. Like, do more, go faster, be quicker, be better. Like, you're living life to make money and to like grind and to be successful in that sense. And I don't resonate with that. So there was a lot going on in the mix of this website journey.
Yeah.
And it took a number of iterations for us to work through the coaching container and then into the Align by Design, which was a group container that was like so wonderfully helpful as well. And it really felt like I was giving birth. Like those moments of doubt, of imposter syndrome, of anger and frustration, of shame, like to be witnessed in that from you so compassionately, like, because you have worked with creative entrepreneurs a long time and you've seen the process. So it felt safe for me to just be like, show up to one of our calls, and I had expected myself to have all of these things done. And yet I was in the middle of an emotional kind of breakdown. And that was part of the process too. Like, I could not have gotten through it. And there kept being this experience of you sort of like slowly pulling me through, painstakingly pulling me through to the bitter end. Well, the sweet end. But it really felt like you were like my business doula.
Yeah.
So it was a lot. It was really intense. And it was beautiful. And it was work that I wanted and I needed to do. Like, the creator put me in the place that I am to put my work out there more so that more people have access to it. And I needed systems. I need to be able to have systems and to have a website so that people can find me beyond word of mouth or beyond, Instagram or the local community. So it was a lot of work on many levels. And it goes deep.
Yeah.
It was wild and beautiful.
Yeah. I love the analogy that you made with it being like a birthing process, right? Like a doula, because you've spoken to the parts that are really hard and really intense and really like heavy and triggering and all of the things. But also building a website is relatively easy. Like, I can build I could remake your website from zero today and have it live by the end of the day. So the actual like technical part of building a website, once you kind of go up that learning curve, which I mean really takes like a few hours, if you really like go hard with it, can take a few hours to understand, navigate the platform and learn how to use the tools. Then you can create something relatively quick and relatively easy. But the process of creating your website that feels true and authentic and aligned and an appropriate container, that's the work. It gets put on this concept of the website of like, it's the website. It's like, well, if you aren't clear on your offers or the pricing or the customer experience, they start where, and then they go where, and then they go where. If you're not clear on all of that, and then you go into the website, you have to confront all of that in the website, which is not actually the website itself. So I feel like it's important to parse that out, to say the work, like the real confronting work, is in getting clear and creating that structure, and then translating it is a separate part of that process.
But most creative entrepreneurs do that simultaneously. It's like getting into a relationship when you don't know what you want. And then the other person is like, do you want to do, like, are we just fuck buddies? Are we life partner? Are we going to get married and have kids? And you're like confronted with all of that stuff in the context of the relationship, which makes the relationship feel so hard and so confronting. But it's not actually the relationship. It's the stuff that surfaces in that container if you haven't got that clarity prior.
Yes. Yeah. 100%. Yeah. And that's what makes my, I think why it was so confronting for me was not just the ancestral and the emotional work, but like as a creative, I'm good at what I do, which is like
you're masterful.
Yeah. Thank you. And showing up and like finding words and telling stories and sharing the practices. But I didn't know what it meant to have an ideal client. I didn't know what strategy meant, like that kind of stuff. It took me a minute to figure out, like, who are the people that are coming to me? Like, where does that intersect? And it was, it was really, really beautiful to be able to, like, it created clarity. The process really helped me to take all of my million ideas as a creative entrepreneur and be like, okay, if I want to go far here, I need to focus and I need to get really clear. And so our working together helped me to get clear. And then I didn't have all of these other things that I want to do because they're actually not aligned for where I'm going, at least not right now. And even though there was a lot of challenge in it, in my inner process, you also, like, you spoke power into me every time we had a session or every time I watched one of your videos. Is like, because your clarity is so strong and you're so good at what you do, it helped me to hear your voice of clarity and truth through my confusion and my fogginess and my fears and be like, okay, this is where I'm headed. And that's what I mean by you kind of like pulled the thread through, like you were really steady and you made it really fun. Like we laughed a lot and I just like, I think like me seeing myself in my own power too and being reinforced over and over and over. Like I come to a session and I'm in the self-doubt and then you just remind me of who I am, like that greater who I am. And I'm like, oh yeah, okay, never mind. I can do this. I know I can do this. Like I just need to shed these emotions and back to my power. So it's really like a centering into power and clarity and alignment, like great alignment that happens in this process.
Mm-hmm. And I think, and reminding you of what you already know.
Yes.
Like you already knew that you came here at this time, in this way, in this body, from this culture, in order to do something meaningful and significant. You knew that. There was no doubt. But then we move into website land. And it's like, what is this strange place? Everything is making me question everything. It's like, oh, I know website land. Where are you trying to go? Like, let's talk about where you're trying to go. And you're like, I don't even know. I'm like, well, that would be very disorienting then. You're moving forward, but you don't like, okay, let's do that work. Yep. So the people who are listening to this, if you're a creative and you have paid for Squarespace twice or Wix twice and your website still isn't live, or it's live but you're like embarrassed to send people there or whatever, it's normal. It's part of the process. There's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. It's just that you are in process. And it requires exactly what you've done. It requires the being with yourself, to opening the channel so that you can tap into the wisdom that is beyond what you can consciously perceive. And also, it requires finding people who can help you. Like maybe that's a friend, maybe that's a cousin, maybe that's a mastermind, maybe that's a Facebook group, maybe that's someone like me, a coach or a designer or somebody. But regardless of who that person is, the most important thing is that they are able to see what is happening. right? And hold space for that nuanced emotional experience. Because if I would have built your website for you, if I would have just been like, oh, I know what it should look like here, let me just do it, and I made everything, it wouldn't have resonated. It wouldn't have been it. It wasn't the website. It was the journey to being able to know what you wanted and who you wanted to project in that platform.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah.
That's where the work is. So I think it's really important that is parsed out of this process, because the whole thing, yeah, it's a lot. It can be really triggering. Entrepreneurship is like such a jet engine for personal growth because it's so confronting.
Yes.
Right? But you have to understand it's not just the business model or the offer structure or the website or whatever. It's all of the things coming together. And particularly when you have a personal brand and you're doing your heart's work, your soul's work, your dharmic work.
Yep. 100%. And I would, it's really important that whoever you're sharing it with is grounded and solid and has clarity, because you can share your dharmic business journey with friends that are in the same place, but they're in the same place.
Yeah.
So that's why, I'm just so grateful that I took the leap and listened and started to, invest in relationship with you and containers with you, because I really needed that clarity and that sense of like, don't worry, like we're going to get to the other side, and we're just going to, because you kind of have to like pull everything apart before you can like put it back together, which is why it felt so transformational. It's like when the caterpillar goes into the cocoon and starts to dissolve and then reforms to become that butterfly. And that's very much like that journey. And everyone's is going to be very different. Like some folks are going to have a way easier time in that journey than I did. And some might really resonate with mine once they kind of go into it. But I think that if I hadn't gotten your support, I would still be in the same place that I was like 3-4 years ago, struggling, bogged down in admin things, not knowing, like just doing things in my day that were taking up more time than my actual dharma was.
Yeah.
And so it's freed up energy, it's freed up space for me to continue to create new things and show up more for community and teach more and practice more for myself. Yeah. And that's really liberating, because I want to feel really good. I want to feel in my joy. I want to feel like I'm enjoying my dharma and I'm not just like caught and bogged down in the work. And it turned into that over the years. So standing on this side now, like for anyone who's in a similar journey, like get support. Get support. It goes a long way.
Right. Yeah. Can we talk a little bit about the launch or the soft launch or the hybrid launch?
Mm-hmm.
Because one of the things that I observed was the amount of pressure that you were putting on yourself. That if it's taken this long, when I finally launch it, everything should be there. Everything should be perfect. I should have all of the pages. I'm not launching a single one-page website. Like it all has to be there. It's all or nothing. And in our last brand therapy session, and I call it brand therapy because it, as you can tell, it's like part emotional therapy, part physical therapy. It's like very much a physical experience as well. In that, we came up with the idea of perhaps relieving the pressure by just publishing it, because it had been 95% there for an extended period of time. So what if we just published it and you didn't tell anybody and you just sat with it? Like, I'm on the other side of it. How do I feel? Can you share a little bit about your experience of that like not black and white. It's out and we launched, or it's, you know, I'm still hanging on to it and the weight of it. Like, can you share a little bit about that experience, that creative alternative?
Yeah, that was brilliant when you mentioned that, because I had been stuck in this place of like, I just need to get this done. I just need to get this done. And then I can launch, and then I can launch. And it just kept getting pushed for months. And so, and this is your acupuncture, your business acupuncture skill level, where you like heard me say the thing and you saw where I was again. And then you came up with this idea, and I was like, oh, I can soft launch it and not tell anybody. That sounds amazing. And that showed me that I actually was ready for it, but there had been such a long buildup to it, and so much pressure and so much expectation that I had put on myself. And this feeling of like, I mean, one thing that I learned from working with you is that your website is ever evolving, and you're always going to be changing it. So it's never going to be just like done. But like, especially when you're just starting to get to that first place of like, okay, it's done enough so that I can like do business, I can free up some space. And I was at that point. I just needed that idea, and it resonated immediately. And I started to feel really excited. We like worked through the last few things in that session. And then we pressed like publish together. And I was like, okay, but nobody knows. So that feels amazing. And it felt good, because I think like this comes back to the journey of the artist, where there are times where you really like, you're ready and you're just kind of like ripe to share, and other times where you're just holding on to whatever it is that you're moving through that's still building, and you're keeping it to yourself. I still needed to keep it to myself and just kind of see what else might come up before sharing it with others. It was just like the most perfect idea, and it landed in that space in between the spectrum of like, I don't have to have it all figured out. It's never going to be perfect. There's no such thing as that. And I don't want to continue to live in this place where I have a pretty much done website and I'm not sharing it with the world. That started to feel really heavy and awful. And so we found the place right in between that was like, okay, it's good enough. It's good for now. It's wonderful. It's beautiful. By the way, my website is gorgeous. My Libra is super happy. And I got to just like, let it be chill. Just like press publish, let it be chill. I shared it with a few friends, and I had like my own private celebration. But in the days after that, I noticed a big releasing of energy. I had space. I had been carrying around this journey for quite some time. And suddenly my mind could think about other things, could move on to other things on my dream list, my to-do list. And just like, I got such a surge of energy from it, from actually completing and coming through finally to like the flowering of our journey. I think it just kept me in this state of like bliss, of high for a few days. I was riding, if not maybe like a week. It was incredible. And important to experience after all of that work, to be like, oh, I did it. We did it. Oh my God, we finally did it. I got through to the other side. And then there's this lightness of being, and there's joy, and there's pride, and there's like self-respect and gratitude, and all of those things. It comes. So it was brilliant. It was really brilliant.
Yeah. And shout out also to Melissa Lund of Superhero Designs, because you started from a template. We changed it a lot, but the base structure was there. But I'm so glad that you shared that liberation and that high, because I think later that week we had a breathwork session. We got on. I had a long day. I was like working on stuff. I'm like, hey Malina, how you doing? And you're like, I'm fucking fabulous. How are you? And I was like, whoa, what happened to you? And you said, I launched my website. I'm like, oh, yeah, last week. Oh, yay. Like we're still on that wave. Like, how cool, how fun. And then I think it was that session that we were just laughing the whole time until we finally were like, okay, Brooke, lay down. We're going to do the breath work. But we were cracking jokes. We were like my belly was hurting, not from the breath work, but just from the laughing. Like both of us are wiping away tears. Like, what is this? It was just this liberation of energy and joy and playfulness and freedom and like the weight and heaviness and pressure and like shame of I should be someplace else than I currently am, or I should be different than how I feel. Like all of that just dissolved. So a website in and of itself is relatively simple if you know what you're doing. It's the symbolic meaning of what does this represent to me?
Yes, absolutely. And it's such an artistic process.
Yeah.
And not just like in the sense of visual art or like designing the website and the colors and all, you know, the branding and all that kind of stuff. But like art is emotional and art is spiritual and art is mental. And it's like this dance and this process you get to journey into. And it very much felt like that. It was really quite a life-changing experience that I didn't even know how much I needed it until I was in it. And I know it's going to support my future going forward. And the website itself, like Show It, is so easy to navigate. Like I can drive on it pretty easily now by myself. And that's amazing. So yeah, it was just, people have asked me like, oh, when are you dropping your website, or how's that process going? And I'm just like, I don't know how to answer that. Because we've just talked like an hour about what that was.
Yeah.
But really, really important process to go through to support my Dharma, so I can just like keep sharing the good medicine and get it out there.
Yeah. I think one other piece that I'd love to just visit before wrapping this conversation up is the piece that, from my perspective, seemed really sensitive and you struggled to make a clear decision around, was around pricing. And this is something that I know a lot of creatives struggle with. From my perspective, it's usually one of two reasons, or maybe both. One is, I don't deserve it. I can't charge that much. I'm not good enough. Who am I to do X, Y, and Z? There's already other people that are doing it better. Who am I? It's this like unworthy insecurity, smallness is one side. And then the other side is, I don't want to be inaccessible. I don't want to price myself out of working with the people that I really want to serve. So we've talked at length around both of these, and we've navigated that territory in your context. But I'd love to invite you to share a little bit about your perspective around that experience for you, and perhaps why, how you were able to shift and break through in a way that felt like you were able to honor yourself enough to charge those prices, but also you were able to create and enhance a space where you can invite people into, so that regardless of how much disposable income they might have, they can still access your teachings and the medicine that you usher in.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a big piece, that like coming into contact with money. And I think like being a wellness, like in the wellness world, supporting people's wellness on all levels, I am naturally empathetic and sensitive and have knowledge of how people need to be supported, like how much they need these practices. So that humbles me. Like it keeps me in a good, like humble, respectful, honest place. And I desire so much to support community and to support anyone who's ready to take greater care of themselves and go into that deeper place of physical, emotional, spiritual, mental inquiry and wellness and healing, and go into even ancestral trauma, like whatever, wherever they're ready for. I'm here to support that. And that means, from what I've experienced so far, there's a certain type of people that are ready for that kind of work. And those people don't always have a lot of money. Some do though, but it's been, it was really a journey to kind of like look at who I work with and who is attracted to me. And like my clientele, my students, people that are attracted to my work, it is quite a spectrum. And that's kind of where it got kind of hard for me, where I was like, well, I do have some people that pay me like really top dollar for what I do. And I am absolutely okay with receiving that. Like, I'm of the belief that if there was more financial abundance in the hands of people like me who really care about Earth and community and humanity, we could change the world in a much bigger way. So I am not going to cut myself off from receiving more money and more abundance. It is one of the languages that is in our landscape on Earth right now. I'm going to use it to my ancestral and my modern day advantage through my Dharma. So and I'm doing a lot, and I continue to do a lot of work around all of that, around the money piece and receiving abundance and repatterning that as like an Indigenous woman who doesn't come from money. So I'm good with receiving lots of money. Like I'm here to receive more.
Hell yeah.
And to learn to build as well, like generational wealth. Like that's kind of one of the things that I'm focusing on these days. I'm getting really curious, seriously curious about how can I actually do that? And I've got great allies in that journey.
Yeah. I'm one of them. I totally see that for you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'm
on your financial abundance team.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, because like the more we have, if you're rooted in your heart and you're like, your mind is in your heart, you're rooted in spirit, and you're rooted in generosity, the more you have, the more you can give, because it is one of Earth's current currencies. So I carry that piece, as well as I know lots of people who can't afford certain amounts to come in and practice with me. And I can't ignore them. And it feels wrong to say, sorry, you can't pay for me, you don't get access to me. The access piece is so, so very important. And so I think in our process, we just figured out a way where I could have both. And that's the beauty of like thinking outside of the box and not being like having to be in the extreme where it's like, well, I'm either getting paid this much or nothing, or the opposite is I'm just going to give myself away for free. But then what that does is I get drained, and that turns into codependent relationship, unhealthy relationship patterns. And then I'm not freed up to continue to carry the work in a good way. Yeah. Because I've been around for a while. I've had a lot of different relational experiences with yoga and personal. And if you give yourself away too much, people will take. They don't always have that self-awareness or that boundary, that healthy boundary and respect within themselves to look at you and say, you're giving me a lot. I'm going to like respect that. People don't always have that. So I need to protect myself, and I need to have those healthy boundaries where it's like, okay, if you can't work with me at this level, no problem. I have this for you, and you still have access to me. Yeah. It's just going to be presented in a different way, but in that way I can work with everybody. And I really did kind of get, that was one of the biggest pieces that showed up near the end that I kept grappling with. Where I'm like, how do I do this? How do I do both? But I think the trick is I just am both. I'm open to receiving, and I am generous, and I do want to give, and I'm going to do it in the best way that I know how, so that I can continue on this road a long time, staying really healthy and having a lot of energy so I can continue to give. And that means I need to receive in certain ways. I've been doing a lot of work around money, and it's been a really beautiful process to not demonize it. Yeah. Especially someone in wellness, and for people that don't think that wellness should be honored monetarily. My belief is completely opposite from that. Like, why are we not paying people in wellness? Because this earth, what is this earth lacking? It's lacking emotional support and processing. It's lacking trauma-informed lenses and somatic practices. It's lacking spiritual connection. That's what we need most on this earth right now. And if I'm going to be bringing that to the forefront, I'm going to get paid for it. And I really want like more people in wellness to honor what it is that they're doing. What we're bringing is a really, really important part of like humanity and society and medicine. So that's where I stand in those pieces.
Yeah. I think it's so important, and it applies to the creative spaces as well. Right. You were speaking more specifically around wellness, but in the creative spaces, there's that same need because it's tied into the same things. It's tied into self-awareness, process, the self-expression, collective communication, right? Yeah. Art is so much bigger and can like hit so much harder than words can because of cultural barriers, right? Because of language barriers. So allowing yourself, like doing what you need to do to create the space to be able to receive, while also understanding people will take as much room as you're willing to give. And it's important for you to honor and respect yourself enough to protect yourself and honor the work that you're doing. Otherwise, you could get eaten alive. Yeah. Right? So I think this is something that, we work through this individually. We also worked through this a little bit in Align by Design around building an offer structure, an offer suite that is viable, right? So you don't necessarily have to choose, I'm only doing one-to-one, super high ticket premium pricing so I can reach my income goals, but I'm also not only doing low ticket offers and I need to have hundreds of people buying that every month in order for it to be viable for me, right? Mm-hmm. Like there are ways to create these hybrids, these creative combinations. And that's one of the things that I'm taking away from this experience working with you and this podcast in particular is just the creative possibilities of problem solving in between two extremes. I'm so grateful for you sharing this journey, for being by your side and being your supporter and champion and creative doula in this process.
Yeah, I'm nothing but honored and happy to share. Like if my story can help others find the courage and the inspiration to keep going down their path, I'm here for the exposure. I'm here to expose my inner world. And just thank you so much. Like I really, truly could not have done this without you. And I know I say it all the time. I'm going to keep saying it. Is just such a life-changing experience that has rippled out in all directions of like the past back into my past and back into future generations. Like it's generational work that we did together. So thank you.
Such an honor. Yeah. Such an honor. Thank you so much, Malina. Before we wrap this up completely, Can you share where people can find you if they want to keep following your journey?
Well, I happen to have a website.
Oh, hey, perfect.
You can find me at www.malinadawn.com.
Oh, so fancy.
Yeah, I have a home now, and I have a newsletter, a Good Medicine newsletter that I've been sending out where I'm keeping everyone up to date on all of the evolving and the consistent offerings. And I get to write in my newsletter and share a little bit more than I can sometimes on Instagram. And that's the best way. Just hop on my website and I'm there. Yeah.
Beautiful. Is there any final thing that feels important to share or acknowledge or say that we haven't already touched on?
The only thing, the thing that I'm feeling right now is just to honor our guides and whoever it was that supported this process of us coming together. You know, my ancestors and my spirit guides and all of those that are just like everything that conspired to bring us into our reciprocal journey. I just feel really grateful for the kindness in life, the sweetness in life, the beauty in life that is still available. Yeah. So shout out to the spirit.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, Malina. I love you so much and I appreciate you so much.
Right back at you.
Thank you so much for listening to today's episode of the Art of Lost and Found podcast. I hope that you are feeling inspired and empowered to go forth and explore your curiosity and creativity. As always, you can head over to www.brookeeston.com/podcast. Thank you so much and looking forward to seeing you in the next episode.